You were talking about observing your brother's lessons, and actually, as you know from your studies in Asian culture and philosophy, that actually the students who are observing the lessons which are being given to the other people are considered to be learning more in some cases than the people doing the actual lesson. And in Asian culture, the teacher is the pinnacle of music culture, much as the composer is in Western music. And however, you were able to study with Nadia Boulanger, who comes as close to this kind of an ideal in Western culture as
yeah, she was a
almost
great,
like a guru figure.
Oh, not almost, she was. During the time here's a curious thing, during the time I was studying with her in Paris, I was also becoming the assistant to Ravi Shankar. And when I say I was his assistant, I informally, but actually became a student at the same time. So I was studying with both of them at the same time.
And you were transcribing Indian music from Ravi Shankar into Western notation, which is, would you agree, pretty much an impossible task. It's at least a daunting task.
It's daunting for us to do as Western composers. It's a daunting task also. The biggest difficulty we have is actually writing down what we hear. It's the same thing that a painter has when they're trying to write down what they see. Or a poet trying to write down what he is trying to say. I don't think it's exclusively a problem to music, but you know, it's interesting.
When I talk to...
Did this just stop? Oh. When I talk to, I've never formally taught school. I didn't think I'd be particularly good at it, and I didn't want to end up teaching counterpoint in some jerkwater conservatory in Columbia, Ohio, or something like that. It was not my idea. I didn't do it. But I often talk to people, because when I was playing in the school, I would talk to the kids about what it was, and composers often asked me what they should be doing. I said, look, I was very, except for in a very, very few cases, I said, and I would say in a very few cases, you're probably not going to write any original music until you're almost 30. I mean, it can happen in popular music, it can happen in jazz, but in terms of concert music, it doesn't happen very much. So basically, the question is, what should you do? And how should you be prepared for the music that you are going to write? I said, well, you might as well just study music. Just do counterpoint harmony. Just do what they do in conservatories, because basically what you're doing is developing tools. So if you were a carpenter and you wanted to build tables, you would want to have very, very good tools to work with. If you didn't have tools that didn't really cut very well, or sandpaper that didn't sand very well, you're not going to make very good tables. I said, what you can do when you're at music school, when you get out of school, make sure you've got a very good set of tools. And then when the moment comes when you actually hear something that you can write down, you'll have a better chance of doing it.
So whether it's tools or musical vocabulary, your encounter with the music of Ravi Shankar, therefore the Indian classical tradition, had a profound influence upon your compositional sense. I think you started to write sometimes without bar lines.
Well, I did. I learned that from him, but that was a curious place to be. I was studying Bach and Mozart with Boulanger, and I was studying contemporary classical music, concert music from India at the same time. And they were very different personalities, and yet at the same time, now here's the interesting thing, Brian. The thing that was interesting about it is that they were, what you said about the relationship to the teacher was almost identical. And yet it's not just in music, it happens in everything. We think about it. If you wanted to learn to cook, you learn from a cook. If you want to learn to sew, you learn from someone who can do it. We think, well, oh, this is just something that happens in Asia. It's not true. It happens in the West, it happens everywhere. If you want to be a poet, if your father's a poet, you probably study with your father. In Africa, if you wanted to be a kora player, you wouldn't study with your father, you would study with your uncle. on your mother's side. It's very...
Why is that?
Who the hell knows? But that's what they do.
We call this tradition.
It's tradition. But the point is this, is that the transmission of this kind of practice or learning happens usually on a one-to-one basis. And so we say, well, we don't have that in us, but we do. I had it with Nadia Boulanger, but then I was working with Ravi Shankar and had it with him at the same time, exactly. Now, the personalities can be very, very different, but the relationship of the teacher to his teacher and to the lineage. Now, for example, when I was a flutist, I was studying with a guy in Baltimore, Maryland named Britton Johnson. He studied with a very great flute player named Kincaid, who was you probably know who he was. He was a great flutist who was at the Philadelphia Orchestra for years, and he had a teacher before him. But because I studied with Britton Johnson, I could always recognize a flutist who had come from the tradition of Kincaid. Now, the same way, I noticed that when I listened to a violinist play, I could tell who the teacher was, and I could tell who the teacher's teacher was. In other words, the lineage of the playing is passed on from student to student. It can go back 2 or 3, 4 generations. My teacher was Boulanger, her teacher was Fauré. There's only one person away, and I'm talking about the 1880s. It's astonishing, you know. And who did he study with, and where that came from? Probably someone in the time of Berlioz. So I'm 2 people away from the music of the 1830s, 1840s. Now we're talking about an understanding of music that's conveyed to you. It's given to you. Oh, it's not done passively. You have to earn it. You have to practice it. You have to, you know how that is. You've done that with your flute playing, I'm sure. It comes through the teacher. But it doesn't, it's not something that you can read about any more than you can read about swimming. But if someone threw you in a swimming pool, you can say, it's not going to help you. You have to actually practice swimming. And you have to practice music. You have to practice all these things. But the point of that is that this way that we, I think it happens in medicine, I think it happens in everything. That knowledge and real, I don't mean wisdom now, I'm talking about, not wisdom is a different thing, but knowledge of a tradition, it happens through another person. You can take classes, but probably, even if you were a chemist, probably there would be one person or 2 people that, and I've said this to people, I said, is there someone in your life who was an important teacher to you? And everybody says, well, I had this teacher, and it could be in grade school, it could be in high school, and without that teacher I wouldn't have whatever. We're fortunate, most fortunate to have had that. Not everyone has a great teacher. I had 2. Without those 2, I couldn't have done what I'm doing. I was sitting with Rob. Let me tell you one story, and then you can ask me. I'm sorry. The trouble with talking to me is I never give you a chance to ask the questions. But,
it's making my job very easy. Thank you.
This is something that happened to me, and musicians, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. I was working with Brian Ritchie for a while, and then I was living in Paris. He ended up in London for a while, and I would go over to see him. I went to visit him once in his hotel, and we were sitting in his hotel room. He was sitting on the bed the way an Indian gentleman would, and I was sitting in a chair, and I said, and I asked him the question. I said, Rabiji, that was the honorific for Rabiji, where does music come from? I just asked him, straight out. I was at that time maybe 25, so we're talking about almost 50 years ago. And he's alive still, by the way, he's 91. Yeah. I just talked to him a couple weeks ago. At that time, he was in his early 40s. And I hadn't noticed, but next to him there was a table, and there was a picture of an Indian gentleman on the table. And he turned, and without hesitation, he turned to the picture, and he made a low bow to the picture. He said, through the grace of my guru, the music has come to me. And it was, And yet, I think that almost he considered himself very, very fortunate. And most of us who have that experience of a teacher, and it doesn't have to be music, and it doesn't even have to be art. It could be your parents, if you're lucky, if you're that lucky. And I did have, my parents were wonderful parents, but that kind of deep knowledge might not come from, might. I think the African system of using the uncle, it keeps the heat out of the house, doesn't it? It's probably a good idea.